Case 1. The Passing of Kamille, Cupcake McKinney. The call came from a birthday gathering in Birmingham's Tom Brown Village on October 12, 2019. A courtyard filled with music, children, and plastic tables draped with snacks. 3-year-old Kamille Cupcake McKinney was running between cousins, laughing and holding balloons the way only a toddler can. In the midst of this ordinary joy, she vanished. Witnesses reported seeing a man and woman in an SUV offering candy to children moments before Cupcake was seen climbing into the vehicle in tears. What began as a confused search around the courtyard escalated into a citywide emergency. This was not a child who wandered off. This was an abduction. Kamille was 3, tiny, loved, and completely unaware of danger. Her family called her Cupcake because of her sweet personality. When she disappeared, her mother's world collapsed into 10 excruciating days of waiting, praying, and searching. Images of her face spread across the nation as Birmingham held its breath, hoping for a miracle that never came. Patrick Devone Stallworth and his partner, Derek Irisha Brown, quickly emerged as suspects, not because they were connected to the family, but because surveillance footage and witness accounts placed them in direct proximity to the group of children that night. Video evidence showed Stallworth purchasing nearly $20 worth of candy minutes before heading to the housing complex. Witnesses said the couple was offering candy to kids and that Kamille was seen crying inside their SUV. Both denied involvement when questioned, but portions of their statements conflicted with the evidence developing around them. The investigation became a race against time. Officers searched abandoned buildings, dumpsters, wooded areas, drainage ditches, every possibility, every tip. Birmingham's entire emergency network mobilized. Volunteers combed neighborhoods. Billboards flashed Cupcake's face. For days, the community held on to the hope that she was alive somewhere. On October 22nd, that hope ended. Investigators searching a commercial dumpster connected to Brown's apartment complex found the remains of a small child. The medical examiner confirmed what Birmingham feared most. It was Kamille Cupcake McKinney. The forensic findings revealed that her passing resulted from a lack of oxygen, and toxicology detected substances in her system that should never have been present in a child. According to testimony, investigators found a plastic sheet in the suspect's apartment containing forensic evidence from the child, alongside digital material found on Stallworth's phone that raised further concerns about his behavior toward minors. The investigation made one reality painfully clear. Kamille's final moments occurred in the control of 2 adults who treated her vulnerability as an opportunity. The legal confrontation was devastating. Separate federal juries found Stallworth and Brown guilty of kidnapping and conspiracy to kidnap a minor, with an additional finding that Kamille's death resulted from the kidnapping. In 2023, a federal judge sentenced both of them to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the highest penalty available under federal law. During sentencing, Cupcake's mother shared a written statement describing the terror of those 10 days and the unbearable grief of losing her child to such cruelty. The judge noted that if the law allowed a harsher punishment, he would have considered it. Their federal convictions were only the beginning. The state of Alabama also charged Stallworth and Brown with capital murder for kidnapping, resulting in the death of a child under 14. Those state cases remain pending as of 2024 and 2025, delayed by mental health evaluations and procedural motions. The state has signaled its intent to seek the most severe penalty allowed by Alabama law if these cases proceed to trial. What makes this case feel like an ultimate betrayal is not a personal relationship between the perpetrators and the family, because none existed. The betrayal came from the violation of a sacred shared space, a child's birthday party. Cupcake was taken from a courtyard where she should have been safest, surrounded by children, neighbors, and family. Stallworth and Brown stepped into that environment, pretending to be harmless adults offering candy, and exploited the openness of a community gathering to target a child. That is the betrayal at the heart of this case. a betrayal of trust, of safety, of the belief that a public celebration is a protected space for children. Kamille's story is a painful reminder that not every danger comes from the shadows. Sometimes it walks into a crowd, smiling and offering candy, waiting for the right moment. Her legacy is the lesson her family now painfully carries. Vigilance in public spaces must be constant, especially around young children who interpret kindness and danger the same way. Cupcake should have gone home that night with a slice of birthday cake, sticky hands, and a balloon. Instead, she became the center of a statewide search and one of the most heartbreaking child abduction cases in Alabama's recent history. Her story calls every adult who watches this to attention. When something feels wrong around a child, hesitation is dangerous. Speak up, step forward, intervene. A single moment of awareness can be the barrier between a predator and a child whose entire life is still ahead of them. Kamille Cupcake. McKinney was 3 years old. She should have grown up. Her story must be the reason another child does. Case 2. The Invisible Witness. The passing of Kahleb Collins. It began with a crash, violent, fast, and entirely preventable, on December 8, 2024, in Fayette County, Alabama. According to the official crash report, the vehicle had been traveling 92 miles per hour when it left the roadway and struck a tree. The force of the impact ended the lives of the father, Stephen Brad Collins, and his 2-year-old daughter, Riley, almost immediately. Their mother, 22-year-old Wendy Pamela Bailey, survived with critical injuries. One reckless moment behind the wheel ended 2 lives in seconds. And for anyone listening, if you ever find yourself in a car where the driver is speeding, angry, distracted, or impaired, speak up. It is not entertainment, it is dangerous. As first responders worked the crash site, a single question shifted the entire investigation. Where is the baby boy? The family was known to have a second child, 15-month-old Kahleb Rowan Collins, but he was not in the vehicle and not with any relatives. When deputies tried to determine when he was last seen, they were met with uncertainty, until the sheriff's office confirmed the chilling truth. Kahleb had not been seen since September 2024. 3 months without a trace of a toddler. No doctor visits, no family interactions, no records. A child who should have been taking his first steps and speaking his first words had quietly disappeared long before the crash, and no one outside the home knew. The disappearance triggered a full-scale investigation. Deputies searched properties tied to the family. Woods, sheds, burn piles, and creek beds were checked repeatedly. At the same time, investigators examined devices and communications linked to the household. According to public filings, the digital evidence raised immediate concern. Messages and images that suggested the toddler may have been in danger before he vanished. Prosecutors alleged that harm occurred inside the home and that 2 adults with daily access to the child failed to act. His mother, Wendy Bailey, and his maternal grandfather, John Elton Bailey. It is important to note that the child's father, who died in the crash, is not charged in this case. The state's case focuses solely on the mother and grandfather. By December 30th, 2024, the mother, Wendy Bailey, had been formally charged with aggravated child abuse, first-degree domestic violence, abuse of a corpse, and criminally negligent homicide. Investigators said the criminally negligent homicide charge related directly to the crash because the 2-year-old Riley was found to be unrestrained at the time of the fatal impact. At that point in the investigation, authorities publicly stated they believed Kahleb had been deceased for several months, though his remains had not yet been found. The district attorney, Andy Hamlin, described the case as particularly challenging, involving the tragic deaths of 2 young children. He confirmed the state would request no bond under Ayda's law. Kahleb's uncle, speaking to reporters, captured the family's anguish when he said, "Hopefully, we can start getting some answers." The community responded with vigils, prayer gatherings, and waves of concern. In a small Alabama county where neighbors often know each other by name, the idea that a toddler could vanish for months without anyone outside the home knowing forced painful questions. Months later, in May 2025, investigators discovered remains believed to be Kahleb's on a family property behind the home. Specialists were called to analyze the site, and while formal identification was pending, the sheriff announced they believed the remains were connected to the missing toddler. The discovery ended the search, but deepened the heartbreak. From a child safety and public safety expert standpoint, this case highlights lessons too important to ignore. In the United States, including Alabama, drivers have a legal duty to operate a vehicle responsibly. Driving while angry, exhausted, distracted, or impaired increases the risk of deadly mistakes. A vehicle is not just transportation, it is a responsibility. If you're in the passenger seat and something feels wrong, say something. One voice can prevent a tragedy. Second, when a child suddenly disappears from daily life, no sightings. Third, pay attention to warning signs, messages, photos, unexplained injuries, sudden absences. These moments often signal danger. When something feels off, it usually is. And lastly, silence is not protection. Silence gives tragedy room to grow. Reporting concerns, asking questions, or seeking help is not interference. It is safeguarding. It is what every child deserves. Unforeseen, Fates does not tell this story for shock. It tells it for awareness. Children cannot speak for themselves. They rely on adults, parents, relatives, friends, neighbors, teachers, even passengers in a moving vehicle, to act when something feels wrong. Awareness is not optional, it is a responsibility. In memory of a toddler whose life should have been filled with first steps, first words, and birthdays yet to come, this case remains a powerful reminder. Speak up, ask questions, trust your instincts, and never ignore the signs, because one moment of courage from an adult can change a child's entire future. Case 3, the passing of Enzo McCormack and his brother, Jessie Taylor McCormack. The story begins in September 2019 in Blount County, Alabama. 18-month-old Enzo McCormack was carried into a hardware store parking lot by his mother, Samantha McCormack. He wasn't conscious. He wasn't responsive. According to emergency personnel, his tiny body was cold to the touch, his pupils were fixed, and he was struggling to breathe. In minutes, first responders realized this was not a routine medical emergency. This was a child in crisis whose injuries were immediately inconsistent with any accidental fall or childhood mishap. Enzo was flown to Children's of Alabama in Birmingham, where specialists fought to save him. But the injuries told the truth no one wanted to face. Doctors documented multiple concerning head injuries and other internal findings consistent with forceful actions. After days on a ventilator, Enzo was pronounced gone on September 9th, 2019. From the earliest interviews, the story given to investigators did not match Enzo's physical condition. While the mother said she heard a thump and later found him choking, medical testimony made it clear that the toddler's injuries could only have come from intense, repeated force. During the investigation, officers also discovered that Samantha had delayed seeking help, making stops for cigarettes and gas, even as her child was in medical crisis. The focus immediately turned to the man who had been watching the children that day, her boyfriend at the time, Robert Keith Elmore Jr. Prosecutors later presented phone records showing that at 5:41 p.m., Elmore messaged Samantha that Enzo ain't breathing right, he is limp and almost blue. The state's experts testified that the toddler's injuries were not only severe, they were inflicted. In October 2023, a Blount County jury convicted Elmore of capital murder in Enzo's death and aggravated child abuse for injuries to the older sibling, Jessie. 2 months later, in December 2023, the judge handed down the maximum penalty, life without parole, plus an additional life sentence. During sentencing, the district attorney spoke plainly. A true man would not hurt an innocent baby. For Samantha, accountability came later. In July 2024, after reviewing the evidence, she pleaded guilty to felony murder for failing to protect her son. A judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison. Her role was not based on inflicting injuries, but on delaying help and allowing a dangerous situation to continue around her children. Enzo's twin sister survived. So did Jessie, at least for a while. because the story did not end in 2019. 3 years later, in January 2023, another emergency call came in, this time from Anniston, Alabama. 6-year-old Jessie Taylor McCormack, Enzo's older brother, had been brought to a local hospital unconscious. Staff immediately recognized the indicators of severe physical trauma and transferred him to Children's of Alabama, the same hospital that had treated his younger brother years earlier. Despite efforts to stabilize him, Jessie passed away on January 20th, 2023. The person accused in Jessie's death was his own father, Joshua D. Clark. Court documents state that Jessie's fatal injuries were caused by striking with a belt or belt-like object in hands, and Clark was charged with capital murder. He remains in custody, awaiting trial. The siblings, Jessie, Enzo, and their twin sister, were born to the same parents, and the two boys lost their lives in unrelated incidents, years apart at the hands of different adults who should have protected them. Their mother, already serving time for Enzo's death, requested to leave jail to attend Jessie's funeral. The court denied it. In the end, only one sibling, Enzo's twin sister, survives. This fused case is a devastating illustration of how danger inside a child's home can take more than one form, and how vulnerability repeats itself when systems, caregivers, and extended networks fail to intervene early. Neither boy could protect himself. Their safety depended entirely on the adults around them, and in both cases, those adults made choices that cost a child his life. The lasting message is clear. Patterns of neglect, instability, or escalating harm inside a home are never isolated events. When one child in a family faces danger, every sibling is at risk. Intervention must be immediate, supervision must be thorough, and a single concern cannot be brushed aside as exaggeration or someone else's responsibility. For Jessie and Enzo, the warning signs came long before the emergencies. The tragedies unfolded because those signs were not met with decisive action. Their story is now an urgent reminder. When a child is living in risk, hesitation can become irreversible loss. Only vigilance, courage, and immediate reporting can save the child who cannot save himself. Case 4. The Sisk family tragedy. It began with a 911 call in Elkmont, Alabama on a September night in 2019. A 14-year-old boy told dispatchers there had been a break-in and his entire family had been harmed. Deputies rushed to the rural home expecting to search for an intruder. What they found instead was a scene that left seasoned investigators silent. Inside the house were 5 family members who had all lost their lives: a father, a mother, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-month-old infant. The security of a family home had been shattered in one night, and the truth behind it would be even more heartbreaking than the scene itself. The Sisk family was known in the community as quiet, close, and hardworking. The children were loved at school and church. Their mother, stepmother to the eldest, was described as gentle and devoted. Their father worked long hours, trying to provide stability. From the outside, nothing appeared unusual. No one suspected the storm quietly brewing behind closed doors. 5 lives, spanning from adulthood to infancy, were taken before sunrise. An entire household brought to a tragic, irreversible end. When investigators began examining the home, and the story of an intruder collapsed almost immediately. There was no forced entry, no disturbed rooms, no signs of anyone breaking into the house. The doorways were intact. Windows were unbroken. The evidence did not match the call. The investigators turned to the lone surviving family member, the 14-year-old boy, who had dialed 911. Within hours, the initial story unraveled. The facts pointed inward, and investigators confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The threat had come from inside the home. The individual responsible was the oldest child, Mason Sisk, a boy who had eaten dinner with the family hours earlier. The betrayal was not just violent, it was intimate. Testimony later revealed that Mason had been struggling with deep emotional turmoil. He had recently learned that the woman raising him was not his biological mother, and investigators testified that he became increasingly angry, resentful, and detached after that discovery. What adults brushed off as teenage attitude was, in reality, a growing crisis. As investigators assembled the timeline, more unsettling details emerged. According to court testimony and verified statements, Mason had previously shown aggressive behavior toward family members. He had threatened them before. He had attempted to harm his stepmother by placing peanut butter, a food she was severely allergic to, into her coffee, and when investigators confronted him after the tragedy, they noted his calm demeanor. One investigator testified that Mason said he was simply fed up with his family. These were not random, isolated moments. They were warning signs, evidence inside the home connected directly back to the teenager. The weapon was recovered at the scene. Ballistics linked it, and investigators determined that no one else could have been responsible. He became the sole defendant in a case involving 5 lives lost, and prosecutors charged him as an adult with capital murder. The courtroom became the setting for an emotional reckoning. The defense argued that Mason was young, overwhelmed, and struggling with identity and mental distress. The prosecution countered that his actions were deliberate, targeted, and planned. He had retrieved the weapon intentionally. He had gone room to room. He knew exactly what he was doing. The court weighed the magnitude of the devastation against the age of the accused. And after reviewing the evidence, the jury reached a unanimous conclusion. In 2023, Mason Sisk was convicted of capital murder for the deaths of his 5 family members. The judge imposed the strongest lawful sentence available, life without parole. Even after appeals, the conviction was upheld, reaffirming the state's judgment that the severity of the act outweighed the age of the perpetrator. For the community, the outcome could not erase the echo of the warning signs, the moments when the crisis inside Mason's mind became visible but was misunderstood. The Sisk tragedy is more than a case. It is a message carved into the fabric of Alabama's history. It reveals the danger of dismissing serious threats from a child or teenager simply because of their age. This story stands as a solemn reminder. When a young person expresses hatred, threatens harm, shows aggression, or reveals a growing detachment from reality, it is not normal teen behavior. It is a warning to intervene, a warning to ask questions, a warning to act. Because the truth is simple and devastating. The mind of a child can hold storms deeper than adults expect, and when those storms are ignored, the cost can be irreversible. In memory of the 5 members of the Sisk family, this case urges every parent, guardian, teacher, and professional to listen closely, take every threat seriously, and never dismiss signs of emotional crisis in youth. Acting early is not overreacting. Acting early is protection. Case 5, the Bibb County Family Tragedy. On the night of July 18, 2024, just after 10 p.m., deputies in West Blocton, Alabama, responded to an urgent call at a home on Green Tree Drive. When they entered, they discovered one of the most devastating family tragedies in Bibb County's history. 5 loved ones had lost their lives inside the residence. 24-year-old Chelcey Kendrick, the mother of 2 of the children, her son Kahleb, 6, her daughter Kinley, 2, and 2 young relatives, Haley Daniels, 6, and Colton Daniels, 8. According to the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, all 5 sustained fatal injuries during a weapon-related incident inside the home. Authorities identified the individual responsible as 33-year-old Brandon Allen Kendrick II, Kelsey's husband and the father of 2 of the children. He was taken into custody that night and booked into the Bibb County Jail without bond. Aydah classified the case as a quintuple homicide investigation, and Brandon was formally charged with 5 counts of capital murder. Officials confirmed the investigation remained active and that findings would be forwarded to the Fourth Judicial Circuit. According to on-record statements from his grandfather, Pastor Alan Kendrick, Brandon lived on his grandparents' property near the home where the tragedy occurred. The pastor told investigators that he and his wife, Gay, heard gunfire that night. Moments later, Brandon entered their bedroom holding a second weapon. Pastor Kendrick stated that Gay moved toward him and managed to keep him restrained until deputies arrived, while the pastor contacted authorities. He also told investigators that Brandon appeared disoriented and claimed he did not remember what had happened. The pastor later shared publicly that his grandson had endured significant early life trauma, including serious emotional and physical mistreatment, details offered as family background rather than official findings. In the days that followed, Pastor Kendrick spoke tearfully to his congregation of more than 40 years, describing the overwhelming weight of losing multiple family members and witnessing the aftermath. He later announced his retirement, saying he needed time to grieve and support his family through a tragedy that had shaken every part of their lives. During the preliminary hearing, an investigator from Aydah testified that Brandon claimed he acted after believing he was receiving disturbing messages through the television, describing the experience as overwhelming and persistent. His legal team entered a plea of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Prosecutors challenged this narrative, pointing to evidence indicating Brandon could recount key parts of the sequence of events. In August 2025, a Bibb County grand jury indicted him on all 5 capital counts. He remains held without bond as the case proceeds toward trial. The emotional impact on the community has been profound. Schools organized remembrance efforts for the children. Churches opened their doors for support and counseling. Neighbors gathered in shared grief, struggling to reconcile the quiet appearance of the home with the unimaginable reality that unfolded inside it. Mental health professionals observing the case emphasized that severe psychological distress does not always reveal itself in obvious ways. Individuals may appear calm while privately experiencing fear, confusion, or distorted perceptions. When distress of that level goes unaddressed, especially in a home with access to a weapon, the risk of sudden, irreversible harm increases dramatically. Early intervention, whether through open conversations, professional evaluation, or urgent support, can stop a crisis before it escalates. In memory of Chelcey, Kahleb, Kinley, Haley, and Colton, this case stands as a solemn reminder that unseen emotional struggles inside a home can have devastating outcomes. Paying attention to changes in behavior, checking in on loved ones, and seeking help when something feels wrong are acts of protection that carry real weight. The tragedy in Bibb County highlights a difficult truth. Crises behind closed doors can escalate without warning, and the courage to intervene may be the only thing that prevents a moment of distress from becoming a lasting tragedy. Case 6. The Daphne Family Tragedy. Just before 4 a.m. in Daphne, Alabama, deputies arrived at a home in the Chelcey Place subdivision to conduct a welfare check. This was a quiet neighborhood known for its stability, active churches, and families who had lived there for years without incident. When officers entered the Smith residence, they discovered 4 family members who had all passed away. Early findings confirmed the losses were the result of a domestic incident inside the home involving a firearm found at the scene. There was no outside threat and no indication of any additional suspects. The family was deeply rooted in the community. 41-year-old Larica Gaines Smith was known for her kindness and involvement in local church activities. Her son, 15-year-old Christian, was remembered as a humble, respectful freshman who made a positive impression on classmates and teachers. 11-year-old Kinsley brought joy wherever she went. Friends, neighbors, and church members described the family as warm, polite, and always eager to help, people who contributed to the strength of their community. Investigators determined that the father, 44-year-old Kenneth O'Neill Smith Jr., was responsible for the fatal incident before he was also found deceased from what authorities identified as self-inflicted action, with the person responsible no longer alive, law enforcement focused on confirming the sequence of events through evidence inside the home. Officials stated the situation appeared to have stemmed from a domestic issue that escalated, but the exact circumstances leading up to it remain unclear. To everyone who knew them, the tragedy came without visible warning signs. There was no interrogation, no extended search, and no courtroom process. Instead, the community itself became the center of reflection. Baldwin County schools encouraged students to honor the family by wearing pink, purple, and blue, colors representing each of the victims. Neighbors gathered to support one another as they processed the sudden loss of a family that had been an important part of their daily lives. The focus moved away from the details of the incident and toward the positive legacy the family left behind. This tragedy left a deeper message that extends beyond one household. Mental health professionals often emphasize that emotional strain does not always show outward signs. Many people, parents, caregivers, and even children feel pressure to appear strong, composed, and in full control, even during periods of intense stress. When those pressures go unaddressed, individuals may feel isolated, overwhelmed, or unable to express what they are experiencing. From an expert standpoint, this case reinforces a critical truth for every family, fathers, mothers, children, and grandparents alike. Moments of internal pressure can influence decisions far more than most people realize. One unspoken struggle, one moment of overwhelm, can lead to consequences that no one can take back. The strongest form of protection any of us can offer to the people we love begins with acknowledging when we are not okay, speaking to someone we trust, and seeking support before stress becomes unmanageable. The legacy of the Smith family is a reminder that even homes that appear stable and peaceful on the outside can carry unseen burdens. Checking in with our loved ones, being aware of emotional changes, and creating safe spaces for honest conversations can prevent silent struggles from growing. In memory of Larica, Christian, and Kinsley, this case encourages every viewer to recognize that asking for help is an act of courage, and that openness and connection are essential steps toward keeping families safe. Case 7, the multi-layered betrayal, the passing of Aydah DiMaso. The call for help came from a home in Gadsden, Alabama, in October 2021. Paramedics arrived to find 3-year-old Aydah DiMaso unresponsive in a bathtub. At first glance, it looked like a medical emergency, but within moments the scene began revealing something far more disturbing. The house was in alarming condition, cluttered, dirty, and unfit for a child. What responders witnessed instantly raised red flags. Aydah had not simply collapsed. Her small body carried injuries that no accident could explain. The fear in the room shifted into a painful truth. Something terrible had happened long before that call was ever made. Aydah was just 3 years old, tiny, trusting, and completely dependent on the adults in her world. According to lawsuit filings, her well-being had already been a concern for months. Alabama's Department of Human Resources had been notified multiple times about the home environment and the adults responsible for her care. Yet despite the warnings, she remained in the custody of her father, Nicholas Joseph DiMaso, and under the watch of her stepmother, Haley D. Metz. The place that was supposed to protect her became the place where she was most vulnerable. Her passing was not sudden. It was the result of a long series of failures that left her without the protection every child deserves. When investigators began asking questions, the adults gave their first explanation: an accident, a slip, a fall, or perhaps a sudden medical episode. But medical staff quickly rejected that account. Aydah's injuries were too extensive, too patterned, too severe. The evidence showed she had endured repeated physical trauma. According to the medical examiner, her body showed more than 50 separate injuries, a number that made it painfully clear that this was not a single moment of harm, but a sustained pattern. The attempt to call her death accidental collapsed instantly under the weight of the forensic findings. The hidden danger in this case was not only inside the home, it was also in the layers of protection that failed around it. The father, entrusted with her safety, did not protect her. The stepmother, another caregiver, contributed to the environment that harmed her. And, according to a civil lawsuit filed afterward, state child welfare officials had been informed multiple times about warning signs, but did not act decisively enough to remove her. This was not one failure, it was several. Aydah slipped through every layer that was supposed to shield her, and in the end, she had no one left fighting for her inside that home. As the investigation progressed, the evidence forced the truth into the open. Confronted with the autopsy findings, Haley D. Metz eventually admitted her involvement and pleaded guilty to aggravated child abuse. The father, Nicholas DiMaso, ultimately accepted responsibility by pleading guilty to felony murder, acknowledging his role in the actions and environment that caused her death. He was sentenced to life without parole, ensuring he will never be released. Metz was also convicted. The legal consequences were severe, but for a child whose life ended at 3 years old, justice could only ever be partial. The verdict could assign responsibility, but it could not restore what was lost. Aydah's case leaves a permanent scar because it forces the hardest truth. Sometimes the people a child trusts most are the ones who cause the greatest harm. And sometimes, even when warning signs are visible, systems and adults hesitate, hoping someone else will intervene. But silence is dangerous. Hesitation can be fatal. Aydah's story stands as a reminder that when a child shows signs of distress, it is never enough to assume someone else will act. Protection must be immediate, vocal, and persistent. Her legacy is a call for vigilance, for neighbors who hear something, relatives who notice changes, teachers who see unexplained marks, and agencies tasked with monitoring risk. Every child deserves a circle of adults who will not ignore the signs. Aydah did not have that circle when she needed it most, and that is why her story must be told with honesty, accuracy, and a commitment to preventing the next tragedy. This is the lasting lesson. When it comes to a child's safety, silence is not neutrality, it is danger. If you see something, say something, and keep saying it until action is taken. A child's life may depend on the voice of the one adult who refuses to look away. Case 8, the catastrophic neglect, the Auburn child tragedy. The call came on a June afternoon in Auburn, Alabama, bringing first responders to a home on Overbrook Drive. They arrived for a report of a 6-year-old boy in medical distress, but the moment they saw him, everything shifted. He was unresponsive and weighed only 21 pounds, the size of a healthy toddler rather than a child in elementary school. The scene immediately raised deep concern. This was not the result of a sudden illness. It reflected the outcome of prolonged and severe neglect. At 6 years old, he should have been active and growing. Instead, investigators found a child whose basic needs had not been met for an extended period. Medical staff quickly recognized that his condition showed the unmistakable signs of long-term inadequate care rather than an isolated emergency. The parents, Mark Edward Watford and Kelly West Watford, attempted to explain what happened, but their statements did not match the medical evidence. Findings also showed indications consistent with a water-related incident, which only increased the level of concern. Nothing supported the idea of a simple or sudden accident. Everything pointed toward a pattern of negligence. The medical results became the turning point. The detailed examination confirmed that the child's condition resulted from sustained lack of proper care, and authorities determined that his passing could not be explained naturally. In a later court hearing, the judge said the child's condition was one of the most distressing he had encountered in his career. Because of the severity of the findings, the original charge of aggravated child abuse was elevated to felony murder for the father, and the mother received the same charge. Both parents were ordered to remain in custody. With no bond as the case continued, the legal response made it clear that what happened was considered one of the gravest forms of neglect under the law. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the Auburn community. It revealed how severe deprivation can occur entirely inside a home without anyone outside noticing. Neighbors rarely saw the child. Family members did not raise alarms. No one realized he was slowly deteriorating behind closed doors. This case is a sobering reminder that the quiet nature of neglect can be just as dangerous as any visible harm. Children who suffer in this way often cannot speak for themselves. They rely on the awareness and action of adults around them, whether relatives, neighbors, teachers, or community members. The Auburn case urges everyone to take signs of dangerous neglect seriously. A child who is never seen outside, a child who appears extremely underweight, a child who suddenly disappears from school or social settings, or a child who seems hidden or isolated are all warning signs that must never be ignored. One phone call can interrupt a dangerous situation. One concerned adult can prevent a tragedy. This story calls each of us to act with courage instead of hesitation. If something feels wrong, speak up, report it, ask questions. Your voice may be the only protection a child has. Case 9, the passing of Demetric Hampton Jr. 2-year-old Demetric Hampton Jr. lived in Center Point, Alabama, a toddler still learning to speak, still relying entirely on the adults around him for protection. On the afternoon of May 13th, 2020, Jefferson County deputies were called to a home on 6th Street Northwest for what was first reported as a medical emergency. When paramedics arrived, they found the little boy unresponsive, his condition immediately raising concern. What should have looked like a tragic household accident instead looked like something far more serious. Medical staff quickly recognized that his injuries were not consistent with a fall or natural cause. The signs pointed towards severe internal injury caused by force, a level of harm a child his age could never have caused himself. The emergency response that day became the beginning of a criminal investigation that would expose a tragedy built on missed warnings. Demetric Jr. was just 2 years old, an age when a child's entire world rests in their caregiver's decisions. He had no ability to protect himself and no way to alert anyone when danger surfaced. His life was short and his vulnerability was absolute. For his family members who loved him, the loss was devastating, but the heartbreak was intensified by the lingering question, could this have been prevented? Investigators immediately turned their attention to the adults inside the home, his father, Demetric Hampton Sr., and his stepmother, Teresa Harris. Only 1 month before this fatal incident, both had already been arrested on child endangerment charges involving the same child. That arrest included drug-related offenses that raised serious concerns about the safety of the environment the toddler lived in. Those earlier charges should have served as a critical warning, a sign that intervention was urgently needed. Yet despite those red flags, the toddler remained in the home and the danger around him continued to escalate. The autopsy report provided the confirmation that investigators feared. The medical examiner determined that forceful impacts caused Demetric Jr.'s passing. This was not an unexplained medical event, it was a criminal act. With that single conclusive finding, the narrative shifted entirely. What began as a puzzling medical call became a homicide investigation, and prosecutors moved swiftly. A Jefferson County grand jury formally indicted Demetric Hampton Sr. on capital murder, the most serious charge under Alabama law. His partner, Teresa Harris, was charged with aggravated child abuse, reflecting the severe harm inflicted on the child before the fatal incident. As the investigation deepened, a troubling truth emerged. This tragedy did not occur in isolation. Records and public filings revealed that Alabama's Department of Human Resources had already been involved with the household. According to a wrongful death lawsuit filed by the family, the child had previously been removed from the home and later returned under state supervision. The suit alleges that, despite clear risk factors and a documented history of concern, protective intervention fell short. What should have been a safety net for a vulnerable toddler instead became one more layer of failure surrounding him. The legal battle in this case now has two fronts. The criminal proceedings aim to determine the full extent of responsibility held by the father and stepmother, with the capital murder charge carrying the severest possible consequences. Alongside that, the civil lawsuit against Alabama DHR seeks answers for the systemic failures that allowed a child already on the state's radar to remain in a dangerous home. Together, the two cases illustrate the dual nature of this tragedy: the immediate harm caused by caregivers and the broader question of how warning signs can go unheeded even by the systems designed to protect children. The story of Demetric Hampton Jr. leaves behind a scar that stretches beyond the walls of one home in Center Point. It is a sobering reminder that when a child is already known to be at risk, every additional warning must be treated as urgent. This case stands as a call for unwavering vigilance within families, within communities, and within the agencies tasked with safeguarding the most vulnerable. A child's safety cannot depend on a single report or a single visit. It must depend on immediate, decisive action the moment danger becomes apparent. In memory of Demetric, this tragedy demands reflection. It urges every mandated reporter, every neighbor, and every professional in child protection to understand that silence is not neutrality. It is a risk. When warnings surface once, they must be addressed before they have the chance to surface again. Because for a child as small, fragile, and dependent as Demetric Jr., one missed intervention can cost an entire future. Case 10. The passing of Quintuple Starks Jr. It was late in the afternoon on July 22, 2025, when the heat in Bessemer, Alabama had reached its peak. The air was thick, the pavement simmered, and the sun showed no mercy. Just after 5 o'clock, emergency lights cut through the stillness outside. Giggles and Wiggles Daycare first responders rushed toward a gray transport vehicle used by a state-contracted service responsible for moving vulnerable children through their daily schedules. Inside that vehicle, secured in his seat, was 3-year-old Quintuple KJ Starks Jr., a child already navigating life inside Alabama's protective system. The internal temperature of that enclosed car had risen to a level no child could survive. Paramedics worked quickly, but the outcome was already irreversible. That moment marked the painful collapse of trust in a system meant to shield him. Before this tragedy unfolded, KJ was simply a little boy in foster care, known for his gentle spirit and innocent curiosity. Like many children in DHR custody, every part of his day depended on adults assigned to him: caseworkers, drivers, daycare staff, foster parents. His biological family expected the state's process to keep him safe while they navigated court requirements. Losing a child under normal circumstances is devastating. Losing a child while he is supposed to be protected by state oversight adds an entirely different weight, one that leaves families with questions that never fade. The chain of events on that Tuesday started with a scheduled supervised visit between KJ and his biological father. As usual, a contracted transport worker picked him up from daycare that morning, took him to the DHR office, and was responsible for returning him afterward. But according to investigative testimony and verified records, the precise order of events after the visit did not follow protocol. Instead of taking KJ back to the daycare, the transport worker made several personal stops. Surveillance cameras and digital timestamps later confirmed visits to stores and additional locations. Eventually, the worker drove to her own home, stepped out of the vehicle, and went inside, leaving the child still strapped in the back seat. Hours passed. No welfare check, no routine verification, no return to daycare. By the time the foster mother called asking where KJ was, the worst-case scenario had already unfolded. This case exposed more than a single mistake. It revealed a broader failure in a system that relies heavily on human vigilance. The contracted transport worker held a position of enormous responsibility, especially when dealing with children who could not speak up for themselves. Her duty required careful attention and routine checks, standards designed specifically to prevent this kind of tragedy. And like many professionals who handle repeated daily tasks, there is a dangerous human tendency to assume The routine has already been completed. It is the kind of quiet, familiar moment when the mind believes a step was taken simply because it has been taken so many times before. But in child safety, that assumption can become a catastrophic oversight. On that day, according to court testimony, the child was left inside the vehicle during one of the hottest windows of the entire summer. A heartbreaking irony hangs over this case. A child placed into state care for protection became less safe under the very system meant to shield him. And this is where Unforeseen Fates steps in, reminding viewers that even a single careless moment, especially in roles built on trust, can alter lives forever. Investigators pieced the timeline together using video, phone data, and GPS records. They confirmed the workers' movements throughout the afternoon and established that the child remained in the enclosed vehicle for hours. Weather reports documented extreme heat. Safety experts have long warned that an enclosed vehicle can become dangerously hot in minutes, making prolonged exposure unsurvivable. These facts shifted the case from a tragedy into one that required legal scrutiny. Court testimony revealed that the worker told investigators she had been distracted, overwhelmed, and remorseful. She acknowledged she had failed to check the vehicle. She expressed regret in front of the child's family during early hearings. But despite any remorse, a painful truth remained unchanged. A young child in protective custody never made it back to the place he was supposed to be safely returned to. During early legal proceedings, prosecutors argued that state law holds individuals responsible for young children to a clear standard, one that requires constant attention and safeguards against foreseeable harm. They stressed the duration of time the child was left unattended and emphasized the conditions that made the outcome inevitable. The defense argued that this was a tragic oversight rather than a deliberate act, pointing to the absence of intent. This created the central legal tension in the courtroom, distinguishing a terrible mistake from a breach of duty so severe that it becomes a criminal offense. By August 2025, the transport worker faced a Class B felony charge related to leaving a child unattended in conditions that resulted in fatal harm. The charge carries a potential sentence ranging from 2 to 20 years. She later posted bond and awaited further proceedings. As of the most recent updates, the case remains open. While the legal system moves forward, the emotional toll on KJ's family is permanent. They must live with the reality that a child meant to be protected by state systems was lost under the supervision of those same systems. The passing of Katorius KJ Starks Jr. is more than a single Alabama tragedy. It is a universal warning about human limits and responsibility. Across every profession and every community, people are stretched beyond what their minds and bodies can safely manage. Drivers push through exhaustion. Officers work back-to-back shifts. Nurses operate under immense pressure. Teachers juggle impossible workloads. Parents navigate overwhelming demands. Fatigue doesn't come with alarms. Overwhelm doesn't come with warnings. But both can silently push someone past the point of safe decision-making. This case stands as a reminder that stress is not an excuse, it is a hazard. The failure that ended this child's life began with a moment when someone exceeded their capacity and didn't stop, and that is a lesson every viewer can take with them. Whether you are a professional driver, a healthcare worker, a first responder, a caregiver, or a parent, knowing your limits is not optional. Pull over when your mind slips. Ask for help when your responsibilities feel too heavy. Take a break before your judgment fades. Saying, "I need a moment," is not weakness. It is a safeguard. It protects you, your career, and the people who rely on you. In the memory of KJ, this story becomes a permanent call for awareness. A reminder that the smallest pause can prevent the greatest tragedies, and that protecting others begins with protecting your own ability to think clearly, act responsibly, and stay present when it matters most. These cases, each one devastating in its own way, reveal a truth that is as painful as it is necessary to confront. Betrayal often grows in the shadows closest to us. From parents to partners to trusted guardians, the very people meant to protect became the source of unimaginable harm. And while every story differs in detail, the core lesson remains the same. Vigilance saves lives, silence endangers them. As we close this collection, remember that awareness is one of the strongest tools we have. When we learn, when we speak, when we refuse to look away, we help build the kind of community where these tragedies become harder to hide and easier to prevent. If these stories moved you, informed you, or opened your eyes to something new, I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe for more in-depth true crime storytelling built on verified facts, empathy, and the voices of those who can no longer speak for themselves. And now, I want to hear from you. Which case impacted you the most? What lessons do you believe should be carried forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and together we can continue to shine a light where it's needed most.